Okay, so last lesson we have mentioned about two important food substance, and these two food substance it do contain energy value. Now, so today's lessons, I would like to recap some of the concept that I've mentioned last lesson, and then I would like to talk about something new. Okay, for example, those food substance do not contain energy value. Now, um, for lipid, okay, please be noticed that as lipid, it has a higher energy value. So normally the lipid it will contribute around two or even higher than two ratios energy. So what does this mean? For example, now assume we got 1 gram of maybe we got 1 gram of uh we got 1 gram of carbohydrates, okay? So we got 1 grams of carbohydrates. Then in this case, okay, we will say that, okay, this 1 gram of carbohydrates may be equals to 1,000 kilocalorie, okay? But then, okay, if we have 1 gram of lipid, then in this case, it may contribute maybe around 2,000 kilocalorie. Now, normally in the questions, we will give you some information. In case if we did not give you any information and you are required to compare the energy value of these three substances, please be noticed that you need to times two for the lipid in order for you to calculate the overall energy value. Is it clear for that? Now, with these idea, okay, so maybe let us quickly have a look on how lipids formed. Now, for lipid, okay, it is built up with around one, okay, glycerol molecules. Now remember, glycerol is different from the glycogen. Glycogen, it is a type of carbohydrates, okay, but glycerol, okay, it is a type of um lipid, okay. So in this case, one glycerol molecules will be combined, okay, with three fatty acid. Then in this case, these two things combines together, okay. So remember, not the glycogen, okay, but if it is glycerol combined with fatty acid, then in this case, we will form what we call the triglyceride. Now, for the triglyceride, it is a type of lipid. Now, for lipid, it will in two forms. One, it is in solid form. If we say that in room temperature, if it is solid form, then we will say it is a fat. But if it is in liquid form in the room temperature, then in this case, we will say that is a oil. Okay. So for most of the food, okay, that contained very high percentage of lipid, it will be including the full fat milk, margarine, nuts, dietary fiber, and also those fatty meats. Okay. But then, okay, you may ask a question, what are the functions for the lipid? So here are some of the functions for the lipid. So I won't go through with you. You can have a look on it, okay? Then next, okay, apart from the functions, in the textbook, we also mentioned about how we test for the lipid. So we will use a special test. We call it the grease spots test. Now, how can we do? First, we need to add a drop of food sample, okay, or we try to make it into juice. Then we let it dry. So in this case, it will form what we call a translucent spot. So this translucent spot remain, then we will say that, oh, that food substance or that food sample, it will contain the oil, okay, or it contained lipid. But it could be sometimes maybe we did not fully dry, so it could be difficult for us to determine. Then in this case, how can we do? We can quickly immerse this filter paper into some organic solvent, for example, alcohol or the ethanol. Then in this case, if the spot disappear, then we can, by doing this process, we can confirm that the lipid is present in the food sample. Then we have the second food substance, we call it the protein. Okay, for protein, okay, it do contribute energy value for our bodies. Okay, so in this case, how can the proteins form? Now, for protein, it is built up by what we call the amino acid. The amino acid, it is very special. Once two amino acids form together, we will say that it will form what we call the dipeptide or the peptide. Okay. So if there is many peptides formed together, then in this case, okay, we will form what we call the polypeptides, meaning that there are many amino acids formed together. Now, once, okay, they coil up and fold in specific ways into some 3D structure, then in this case, we will say they are the protein. Now, once the protein forms, okay, so they will keep binding it, okay? So once they bind or they form what we call some specific sites, then in this case, they will form the desired protein that we want. Now, in our body, we do have a lot of amino acid, but some of the amino acid, they are not, they cannot produce by our body. But some of the amino acid, they can, okay, produced by our body. Now, most of the amino acid, around 12, okay, amino acid, they can be produced by our body. But rather than we will say that they are some essential amino acid, we will say that they are the non-essential amino acid because we can easily produce by our body. So they are not limited. But then, okay, those, okay, we need to obtain from the diet or we need to get it from other places. Then in this case, we will say that they are the essential amino acid because these are some what we call they are we cannot produce by ourselves, so they are limited. So in this case, we will say that they are essential for us. Then you may ask a question, what will be the food that rich in protein? Now, here are some food that rich in protein. For example, milk, meat, fish, egg, beans, and dietary products. So we noticed that, in fact, for us to absorb the protein, it is quite difficult because they are too complicated or they're too large. So how can we do? We'll break it down. We'll break down into amino acid, and then it will be absorbed into our body. And these amino acids will later on use in building different structures or different things and used for different functions. Now, one of the important functions for the protein is that they will use in the growth and also repair of our body tissues. Apart from that, okay, we can also see that there is some functions, okay, for the protein. So for producing enzymes, antibodies, or some hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a type of protein that keep in our red blood cells. So apart from that, they do have some hormones, okay? So they are built up by the protein. And most of the times, okay, protein, it do contain energy value and it has slightly higher, okay, energy value than the carbohydrate. But normally we will say that, okay, they are having a 1-to-1 ratio with the carbohydrates, but it will be 1-to-2 ratio when we see protein and lipid. Okay, so remember that lipid, it has a highest energy value comparing among these three food substances. Then if there is lack of protein, then we will have a problems, okay? We will got a deficiency disease, we call it the kwashiorkor. So in this case, this, okay, disease, it will cause the poor growth of the human and it will give some weak muscle and a swollen abdomen, okay? Now, then, okay, let us move on to something that do not contain energy value. So in this case, the first item that do not contain energy value, it will be the mineral. For the mineral, it includes the inorganic. It is a type of inorganic food substance. So as it is inorganic food substance, so it means that we only need a small amount. And apart from that, as it do not contribute or it do not provide energy value. So in this case, it mainly used as the regulations of metabolic reaction and help building some tissues. So there are several types of mineral. First one, we call it the calcium. Calcium, it is a component of bones and teeth, okay? So the calcium is mainly involved in several processes, for example, blood clotting, muscle contraction, and sending messages, okay, in the nervous system. So if, okay, we do not have enough calcium, then we will face a problem we call the ricket. Now, ricket is a type of disease or deficiency disease. It means that we will have some soft bone. So the legs will bend under the weight of the body. So in this case, we will not have a straight leg, rather we will have a curved leg, okay? Then apart from that, okay, the bones, okay, they will become porous, meaning that there is a lot of hole inside the bones. In this case, they will become brittle and they will no longer easy, okay, to withstand uh, a very high weight, okay, so they can be easily broken. So we can see the pictures of two types of bones. The lower one, it got the normal sized bone, but for the um, upper one, it shows the people who got the disease, okay? So we can see that this disease, we will say it as the osteoporosis. In Cantonese, we call it 骨質疏鬆症. So it is a type of deficiency disease if we are insufficient of calcium in our bone. Now, how can we get enough calcium? So here are some types of food that contain a lot of calcium. For example, tofu, milk, spinach, etc. So these are some food that contain a lot of calcium. Then, as we notice that, okay, calcium is something that is essential because it's do help us to have a strong bone. So some drinks, okay, for example, some orange juice, soy milk, they will add a little bit calcium so that these can help us to increase the intake of calcium in our daily life. Now, then apart from the calcium, we also have the second types of mineral. We call it iron. So now the iron, okay, what is the functions for iron? It is the component for the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin, it is a pigment within the red blood cells. So in this case, this pigment will help us to carry oxygen. So you can see here, there is a heme group. Now, you can see it is some uh, coiled structure. So in fact, this is some protein. So these protein will bind with the iron, and this form what we call a heme group. Now, this heme group will help to carry oxygen. So the oxygen will bind with the iron. So in this case, this will give us what we call a red color. So this is why this pigment is red in color. So if, okay, we do not have enough, okay, iron, then we will have a deficiency disease. We will have a disease called anemia, which is in Cantonese, we call it 貧血. So in this case, we will faint easily because we do not have enough hemoglobin to carry oxygen to the brain. So in this case, we can easily feel tired, or even we can easily lose the um, uh, conscious because of the enough not enough oxygen. Then where we can find iron, or how can we intake more iron? So for example, some bean like soybean or spinach or liver, or even beef, okay, they do contain a lot of iron. So in this case, we can intake these kinds of living things, or not, I mean, this kind of food, okay, so that we can obtain enough iron. Then, okay, apart from these two types of mineral, we do have another types of inorganic, we do have another type of food substance. We call it the vitamins. Okay, for vitamins, it is an organic food substance, but our body only needs small amount because they do not carry any energy value. So it mainly helps us to regulate the metabolic reaction. Now, for the vitamin, it's divided into two types. One, lipid soluble, and the other one, water soluble. For example, vitamin B and C, they do are water soluble. So meaning that we cannot be stored in body for a large amount because they can easily excreted out by our body. But then we have another one, we call it the lipid-soluble vitamins. For the lipid-soluble vitamins, they do contain A, D, E, and K. Okay, so in this case, they can be easily stored in our body because they can store inside our lipid. And normally, for the lipid, it is quite difficult for us to um, use. So in this case, they will store and accumulate. Now, for most of the vitamin, they are easily lost when they are dissolved in water, and they are easily destroyed when they are exposed to high temperature or oxygen. So, what is the functions for us to have these kinds of vitamin? So, vitamin, in fact, for example, if we lack of vitamin, then in this case, okay, we may have certain type of deficient disease. Now, for example, for vitamin A, it is a vitamin for us to form the pigment in the retina. So if, okay, we do not have these kinds of vitamin, then in this case, we will have a poor vision in dim light, or even we got the night blindness, meaning that we cannot see clearly in the night. And where will the vitamin A keep? So most of the vitamin A, it will keep in our cornea, skin, or some breathing system. Okay. So in this case, okay, uh, these, okay, vitamin A, okay, it will help us to provide us a slightly reddish color. And these vitamin A will provide or create some pigment, okay? And these pigment or these substance will help us to keep both cornea, skin, or some breathing system healthy. Then, okay, you may ask a question. Apart from we may got the night blindness, we may also, okay, if we do not have enough vitamin A, then we may cause the drying up of our cornea and the skin. So in this case, for the girls, if you want to keep, okay, your skin, okay, full of water, then in this case, you need to intake certain amount of vitamin A. Then in this case, your skin will not dry up quickly. Then apart from that, okay, for vitamin A, okay, so if you, for example, you got some influenza, so normally your parents will ask you to intake vitamin A. Now, these vitamin A, in fact, it can help us to uh, strengthen the mucus within, I mean, strengthen the um, defense, okay, system within our breathing system, okay? So if we lack of vitamin A, then in this case, it may easily cause us have the infection of the lining in the lungs and also trachea. So eating vitamin A, this can help us in three things, but most importantly, it will help us to um, prevent, okay, the night blindness. Then where we can find vitamin A? Now, as vitamin A, it is something that is lipid soluble. So most of the um, ways for us to obtain vitamin A, it would be we can drink the milk, we can drink the fish liver oil, we can drink or not drink but eat the liver or eggs. Okay, they do contain vitamin A. Apart from that, okay, those food that contain carotene, for example, carrots, okay, mango, then in this case, these carotene, it will convert into vitamin A in our liver. So in this case, we can eat more carotene. so that our body can produce, okay, vitamin A. And this vitamin A will be later on used, okay, in different functions. Then we have another one, we call it the vitamin D. Vitamin D, it is a vitamin that promotes the absorption of calcium and also phosphate. So it is essential for us to keeping the bones and teeth strong. So in this case, okay, the same thing again, as vitamin D, it has similar functions as the calcium. So if we do not have enough vitamin D, then in this case, it will give us a big problem. What it is, it will be the racket, okay? So we will find, okay, soft bone and the legs will bend, okay, under the weight of the body. Then how can we get sufficient or enough vitamin D? First thing is that you need sunlight, okay? So vitamin D, okay, it is produced by the skin under the sunlight. So if we shine more, then we can have more vitamin D. Of course, it is not recommended that you expose in the sunlight for a long period of time because this may cause you have the skin cancer. But at least, okay, you can maybe expose for a short period of time, then your body will have sufficient vitamin D. But sir, you may ask me, okay, so maybe I got skin cancer, then how can I do? Okay, I also need vitamin D. Then you can try to drink, okay, fish liver oil or some fatty fish. They do contain a large amount of vitamin D. Okay. Then, okay, we will have another one. We call it the vitamin C. For vitamin C, okay, it is a type of vitamin that is water soluble. So, what is the functions for vitamin? Okay, vitamin C. Vitamin C, it is used for the growth and repair of some connective tissues and also healing wounds. So, it promotes the iron promotes the absorption of iron from the plant, and this help our immune system work properly. So if we do not have enough vitamin C, okay, so in this case we will have the deficiency disease of scurvy. So it is a weak and bleeding gums. It can cause our gums become weak and also bleed. Okay, so apart from that, it will cause us to have a poor healing wounds. So in this case, our wounds can difficult to heal. Then in this case, okay, apart from that, okay, we may also form some red spots on the skin and we may have some joint pain. So how can we obtain vitamin C? Basically, vitamin C appears in fresh vegetables and fruit. So if we consume, okay, the fresh vegetables and also fruit, then in this case, we will obtain enough vitamin C. Now, okay, how can we find out or how can we know whether these food samples they do have vitamin C? We can use what we call the DCP-IP solution to help us to test whether it contain or whether there is a presence of vitamin C. So first thing, okay, what do we need to do? We need to add, okay, the blue DCP-IP solution into the test tube first. Then, okay, we will mix a little bit distilled water with it. Now, if we drop, okay, certain amount of food sample into the DCP-IP solution, if it turns to colorless, then in this case, we will say that vitamin C is present. So in this case, we can use the DCP-IP test to test or to compare the vitamin C content. If there is fewer drop of food are needed to decolorize the same volume of DCP-IP sample, that means that these food contain a higher amount of vitamin C. Now, lastly, the things that we need to know is that the dietary fiber. For dietary fiber, we will have two types. One, it is soluble. Second one, insoluble. Now, in DSE syllabus, we mainly ask you about the insoluble dietary fiber. And these insoluble dietary fiber are mainly consist of the cellulose from the plant cell wall. As they are cellulose, so meaning that they cannot digested by our body. So we cannot digest them. So in this case, they do not provide us any energy. However, they can help us to help the feces to pass out from our body. So it can adding the bulk towards to the food. So this stimulate the peristalsis. So you can think like in this way, okay, assume, okay, we got the food here. Now, okay, what happened? Okay, how come? So now what happened? Right? Okay. So once the foot want to move, then in this case, okay, we need the contraction and also the relaxation of the muscle. So in this case, the foot, okay, will later on squeeze, okay, towards to the front. Then we will say that, okay, the this movement we will call it as the peristalsis. So the dietary fiber help to stimulate the peristalsis. So if okay we are insufficient of dietary fiber, then in this case we will have the constipation, and this will increase the risk for us to have the colorectal cancer. So where we can find the dietary fiber, it mainly found in the plant-based food. For example, the vegetables or the fruits. And the last one, it would be the water. So they do not contain energy value, but they are very important in our body life because it serves as a reactant in some of the chemical reaction. It serves as a medium for chemical reaction. Lastly, it acts as a medium of transport. Apart from that, it is also a cooling agent to help regulate our body temperature. At last, it serves as a major component for many lubricating fluid. And we mainly can obtain water from the food and drinks. So small amount from the respiration in our body. So, but mainly it is from the food and drinks. So in this case, we have already go through the whole part of 5.1. And later on, the next lesson, we will try to work on the food test together. And I hope, okay, you can get a brief idea on why we need to use the food test to test or how we can use the DCPIP solution to test the amount of vitamin C.